Well, it's Friday, and we finished up James yesterday with James chapter 5 and that whole discussion. I hope you were really enjoying those James studies because, man, it was just so good for me. But as I've been asked to share the stories about the women, a little bit more detail about these women that I am releasing in the teas on Tuesday. So since we had Jael and Deborah released this week, we're going to talk a little bit more about their background. Now, I'm going to be totally honest here that this is not an easy story for me. In fact, this is probably my least favorite story in the Bible that I've really struggled with. Deborah, I love, but Jael, not so much. And I tended to always skip past that story because it was just so gruesome. In fact, this is my Bible I've had since I was 12, and I even have a note in here, disgusting. Man, this is when I was probably like 13. Man, if you ever put the Bible into a movie, it would be R-rated. And now I'm looking back going, we actually have a lot of movies now about the Bible. And I don't know if they've ever done one with Jael or not, but oh, it's intense. Okay, so let's get into a little bit of some background here. And it's really short. There's only a short amount of time that Deborah's here, that we see her, and it's just in chapter 4 and 5. So it says, after Ehud died, this is Judges 4, the Israelites once again did evil in the eyes of the Lord. So the Lord sold them into the hands of Jabin, a king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. Now we have to know all of these players in this story because they are important. The commander of his army was Sisera. So Jabin is the king of Canaan. The commander of the army was Sisera. Now, the only reason why we're even dealing with this is because the Israelites had failed to drive out the Canaanites. They were supposed to have done that, but they didn't drive them all out. So these Canaanites have regrouped, and they are trying to attempt to restore their lost power. So that's why we're here again in this situation. Now, the Israelites are doing evil in the eyes of the Lord, so this gives opportunity for the enemy to get a foothold, to get their foot back into the door. So the commander, like I said, of his army was Sisera, who lived in Harosheth Hagoyim, and I'm not going to pronounce probably any of these right, so just go with me. Because he had 900 iron chariots and had cruelly oppressed the Israelites for 20 years, they cried out to the Lord for help. Of course, this is their pattern. Whenever things get bad, that's when they cry out for help, and the Lord does deliver them. He's just so merciful. He has far more mercy than I think I would ever have had. So Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, was leading Israel at the time. Now, there is no hesitation in Israel or any kind of surprise to having a woman prophetess. What is unique is that she becomes a judge, and she's the only female judge of Israel. Female leader of any sort, really, when it comes to king or priest or judge. But as that role, she's a seer, she's a visionary. She would be able to handle, like Moses did, be able to handle the disputes that people brought to her. And it says that she held court under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim. And the Israelites came to her to have their disputes settled. So she was the voice of God for the people. Now, Lapidoth, her husband, means torches and flashes. And then this next person that comes into the story in verse 6 is Barak, and his name means lightning. Deborah means bee. So I'm not really sure. Again, this story is so, I think there's a lot more here that I just haven't fully learned, and I'm so eager to find out more the more I go back and study. But my studies have been more in the New Testament and not super entrenched into this, but I did do a little bit of studying. But her name was Bee, and the only thing I could even possibly correlate was the fact that she was the queen bee of Israel, since she was the mother, rose up a mother of Israel, as she says in her song. And the fact that Lapidoth is torches and flashes, and then you have Barak, which is lightning. So there's a little bit of some similarity there, but I'm not really sure exactly how the two tie in. So, like I said, I'm being totally honest. This story gets me in a lot of ways. All right, so she sent for Barak, son of Abinoam from Kadesh in Naphtali, and said to him, the Lord, the God of Israel, commands you, go take with you 10,000 men of Naphtali and Zebulun, Lead the way to Mount Tabor. I will lure Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his troops to the Kishon River and give him into your hand. So God's going to give to Barak, Sisera, Jabin's army. He's going to give everything over to him. But Barak says, if you go with me, I will go. But if you don't go with me, I won't go. So it's kind of like he's going, Mommy, I need you. I can't do this alone. So Deborah says, okay, very well. I will go with you. But because of the way you are going about this, because you are not confident, God's already told you what to do. You're supposed to do it. We already ran into this problem before when the Israelites were supposed to have taken the Canaanites out, but they didn't do it. And now you're trying to do the same thing again. I'm not going to do it unless you go with me. Well, we're going to get the job done. At least we're going to get the job done. And if that requires me to go with you, then I'll go with you. But we're going to get this job done. So she says, I will go with you, but because of the way you are going about this, the honor will not be yours, for the Lord will hand Sisera over to a woman. So Deborah went with Barak to Kadesh, where he summoned Zebulun and Naphtali, which is the other tribes. We don't know why the other tribes didn't go, but these are the two that he's able to summon. Now, the amount of 900 iron chariots that they had, that is an invincible army. So Jabin and Sisera had no trouble oppressing all of Israel during this time until this woman of God stands up, which is just incredible. It's for 20 years they have been oppressing until one woman stands up and says, I rose up as a mother of Israel. Now, here's a little bit of some details here. Now, Heber, the Kenite, had left the other Kenites, the descendants of Hobab, Moses' brother-in-law, and to pitch his tent by the great tree and Zananim, something like that, near Kadesh. Okay, so background. Kenites also kind of are synonymous with the Midianites. These were part of Moses' father-in-law's family. So this is where Jethro was part of the Kenites, the Midianites. They seem to be interchangeable a lot of times in referring to Jethro's descendants or his clan. So these were allies to Israel. Jethro became, if you will, a Gentile convert to be, in fact, later on becomes a priest of Yahweh. So these Kenites were allies to Israel. They were very friendly towards Israel. They had good relationship with Israel. They took care of each other. In fact, we even see this later on. They get to be a part of Judah, and David even gives them spoils from some of the battles. So this is a very close people group to them. But Heber removes himself from them. He leaves that group of the Kenites and he goes to another place and pitches his tent by this great tree. Now, when they told Sisera, so Heber is going in and telling Sisera, the Jabin, the ones that have been oppressing Israel, he goes and tells them what Barak is doing, that he's going up to Mount Tabor. So it's kind of like a Benedict Arnold for Israel. Sisera gathers together his 900 iron chariots and all the men with him from Harosheth Hagoyim to the Kishon River. So they should defeat Barak completely. But that's not what happens. Then Deborah said to Barak, Go, this is the day the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Has not the Lord gone ahead of you? So Barak went down to Mount Tabor, followed by 10,000 men. At Barak's advance, the Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots and army by the sword, and Sisera abandoned his chariot and fled on foot. But Barak pursued the chariots and army as far as Harosheth Hagoyim. All the troops of Sisera fell by the sword, not a man was left, except Sisera. Sisera, however, flees on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. Okay, so it gets back to this. So, and it says, because there were friendly relations between Jabin, king of Hazor, and the clan of Heber the Kenite. Sisera feels comfortable to go to this particular clan because, again, they've come out from Kenites. Now, again, we don't know why Heber did this. We don't know if it's because he saw that Jabin and his people were so great that maybe it was better to cast lots with them. Maybe he thought they would be softer for him if he was friends with them, so he wouldn't be oppressed. Whatever the reason is, he withdrew. Seems like Jael, his wife, did not exactly share the same desire to withdraw from the rest of their family, from the rest of their clan. So, because we see what happens next. So, Sisera withdraws to the tent of Jael. He thinks it's safe there. Now, in this culture, hospitality for a man was to be shown by a man. So Jael is actually kind of usurping this and bringing Sisera into her tent, and she welcomes him and says, "Come, my lord, come right in. Don't be afraid." So he entered her tent, and she put a covering over him. So she's trying to hide him. One, also, it would be very unlikely for you to find a man inside of this woman's tent. So this is another reason why he's trying to hide there. Plus, you put the blanket over him, easy to hide. So the thought would be Barak would, if he even came back into that area to try to look for him, he wouldn't have even thought to look in this tent. But he says, "I'm thirsty." He says, "Please give me some water." She doesn't give him water. She opens a skin of milk, gave him a drink, and covers him up. Now, milk is known, especially warm milk, is known to make you drowsy. Put a cover over you, especially a heavy cover like these probably were with the animal skin. You definitely will put somebody out to sleep, especially after he's been so exhausted, as we see. And then he says, in verse 20, "Stand in the doorway of the tent," he tells her. "If someone comes by and asks you, 'Is anyone here?' say no." But Jael, Heber's wife, picked up a tent peg and a hammer and went quietly to him while he lay fast asleep, exhausted. She drove the peg through his temple into the ground and died. That's the part I always like to skip over. But, the question has been to me, she was, one of the other parts of this culture is that the women set up the tents. So she very much understood how to use all these tools and stuff. But why don't she just take the hammer and hit him across the head, knock him out, or kill him that way? Instead, she drives the peg through his temple. But it doesn't say that she stopped there. She drove it all the way to the ground, and that's in Judges 5 even. So I don't understand. There's something there. I feel like the Lord's wanting to show a little bit more, but I can't quite get past the grotesqueness. I would to really, really deeply study it. But I probably will, and at some point we'll make a mention of it. But that's what she does. Is she doesn't. Actually, the thought that came to my mind was she was staking her claim. Again, I don't have the answers for this story. This is a very difficult story. But Barak comes by in pursuit of Sisera, and Jael went out to meet him. "Come," she said, "I will show you the man you're looking for." So he went in with her, and there lay Sisera with a tent peg through his temple, dead. On that day, God subdued Jabin, the Canaanite king, before the Israelites, and the hand of the Israelites grew stronger and stronger against Jabin, the Canaanite king, until they destroyed him. Okay, so we got into the story. What is the takeaway for all this? Well, this is where I've come to into this story. Is first of all, Deborah, which is the part I connect with the most, honestly. Deborah was confident to know that when there was a position that needed to be filling, then she stepped into that role. Sometimes we wait for God to call us, or we think we need to have all these little pieces and have everything in our life figured out, or maybe the calling is more clear. But sometimes it's just simply that there is a gap and that somebody has not taken the leadership, and somebody needs to step up into that role. And this is what Deborah does. Nobody's taking leadership. So in her song, she says, "Wake up, wake up, wake up, Deborah. You see this, you see that there is a gap here. You see what's going on. Step up." And so she does. She steps up and she says, "Until I, mother, everything, the roads were abandoned, travelers took to winding paths, village life in Israel ceased." So there was no bonding, there was no family, there was so much had stopped because of the oppression. And it says, "Until I, Deborah, arose a mother in Israel. When my people began to choose new gods, this war came to them." So it was time to wake our people up. And I needed to step into that role and get us back into track, because there was a gap and I could fill it. And I didn't need to wait for somebody else to keep thinking, somebody else will do it, somebody else will do it. There's a gap. I can step into this role and fulfill it. And she when she did, she walked in confidence. She walked in authority. She walked in humility. And she carried out, she was a prophetess. She understood the heart of God, and she heard from God. And she was also a seer and a visionary. She knew how to settle disputes. She walked in great honor and respect. So much so, obviously, Barak didn't even want to go into battle without her. And then you see the contrast. This is the other part we see. We see a contrast between Barak and Jael. Barak had no confidence. He was not able to carry out things on his own. He was given a plan by God even, and told what the end would be, and yet he still did not walk in that. Whereas Jael, who's not an Israelite, but very much still believed in the God of Israel, because she seems to still be connected to her Kenite people who were great allies of Israel and who were worshipers of God, Yahweh. But she sees that there's an opportunity. There's a threat to Israel and God's people. And so instead of just twiddling her thumbs and going, oh, well, maybe somebody will come and deal with Sisera while he's sleeping. Maybe Barak will come by and he can take care of this. She doesn't do that. She doesn't wait for somebody else to step in, just as we were talking about with Deborah. Deborah didn't wait for somebody else to take in. They both stepped into the role. That was that opportunity, that gap that needed to be fulfilled. They both stepped into those positions as there was an opportunity and a moment, and they took care of what was in front of them, and they got the job done without waiting, without being weak, and without questioning. They were quick and decisive, and they brought about the end of this oppression to God's people through this time. And then we see, of course, that the Israelites grew stronger and stronger because of these events that took place between Deborah and Jael. And because of both of them, that's what helped to bring the subduing of Jabin, and again, Israel becoming stronger. So here we have two women that are willing to step in when no one else is, and to accomplish the work God has set before them. So in this story, this has been my prayer for you, is that if there is a gap and there's a position that has been open in different ways, it doesn't mean that's in ministry or business, whatever it is, if there is a gap that needs filling, sometimes we can't just keep sitting around hoping somebody else will fill it. Sometimes our role, God has placed us there at that particular time because he knows that we can step into that and follow through on what God is needing for that hour to accomplish his purpose. So if you haven't gotten the tea, grab you some Deborah and Jael. Of course, I talked about it in the Shava Made page. Deborah is very much a wake up. It's the tea I drink every single morning. Very much a more energizing, sustaining energy throughout your day. And then Jael is a little bit more calming. It's still caffeinated, but it is it's a chai. So you do half milk, half of the chai. So it makes where you see the energy of Jael, but also the lulling to sleep of Sisera. So both of those are in there, and you can taste those. But it's a really interesting story. And if you have studied this story or you have more insight, I would love to be able to chat with you. So send me messages, put it in the comments. I'm eager to learn more about this story. I can truly get into a much deeper dive into understanding what God is trying to communicate through this story of Jael.